She was worth nothing to them. Emily Walker thought as she sat alone in the dark corner of the room, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision her parents had made for her. Her own flesh and blood had sold her, all because she couldn't give them the one thing they wanted, an heir. To them, she was nothing more than a burden, a disappointment. She wasn't the daughter they hoped for. Her parents' rejection was a wound that had festered for years, but today it had become her prison. This wasn't the life she imagined, not the future she dreamt of. Instead, she was being shipped off to an unknown family, to a life she had no say in. No one could understand the shame she carried, not even the wealthy family she was to belong to now. She was just another possession to them, a solution to their problem, a way to fill their empty halls with wealth, but not love. She wasn't the daughter they wanted, the wife they dreamed of. She wasn't anything. At least, that's what she believed. But everything changed the day she met him. Duke Henry Ashford was a man of power, a man who could buy anything, anyone. The moment he laid eyes on Emily, his gaze was different. He didn't see a broken girl who had been cast aside. He saw something more. He saw strength, beauty, and something deeper that intrigued him. For the first time, Emily felt seen. Henry had a reputation for being cold, distant, and only interested in acquiring what he desired. But when he saw Emily, something shifted inside him. She wasn't just a pawn in a game of social status. He knew that, and the more he looked at her, the more he realized there was something about her that demanded respect. He was used to controlling his world, but Emily didn't fit into any box he had ever known. She wasn't the docile woman he was accustomed to. She was fierce, quiet, and strong, even in her pain. As Henry made the decision to take her from the hands of her family, he wasn't just rescuing her. He was starting to see the person she was meant to become. Emily, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to feel something other than fear. There was a glimmer of hope in her heart, though she couldn't admit it yet. Could it be possible that someone could see her as more than just an object? Could it be that she could have a future of her own choosing? Henry Ashford had never been the kind of man to believe in fate, but the moment Emily crossed his path, everything he knew about the world began to unravel. She was no longer just a woman in need of saving. She was a challenge. She was the one thing he couldn't control, and that intrigued him more than anything else. The days that followed were nothing like Emily had ever imagined. Life at the Duke's estate was grand, filled with opulent rooms, elegant decor, and a strange, suffocating silence. Despite the grandeur, she felt more alone than ever. The walls of the mansion seemed to whisper of her status, an object, a prize claimed, but never truly free. The servants were polite, but distant. They looked at her with pity, as if they knew what she had been through, yet offered no comfort. Henry, on the other hand, was a mystery. He was there, yet not there. He would appear at dinner, his presence commanding the room, his gaze sharp and calculating. Emily couldn't understand him, nor could she deny the pull she felt when their eyes met. There was something in the way he looked at her, something more than just curiosity. It was as if he saw past the walls she had built around herself. The first time he spoke to her, it was over dinner. His voice was soft, yet firm, as if he was used to being obeyed. "You're not like the others," he said, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than usual. Emily didn't know how to respond. What did he mean by that? Was he pitying her, or was he intrigued by her? She looked away, trying to hide the uncertainty in her eyes. But Henry wasn't the type to let people hide from him. "Tell me, Emily," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "What is it that you want?" She froze, unsure of how to answer. What did she want? Could she even want anything for herself anymore? She had spent so long trying to survive, trying to fit into a life that was never meant for her, that she had forgotten how to dream. I don't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Henry leaned forward, his gaze intense, his eyes searching hers as if trying to find the answer for her. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, his voice softer now. "But I want you to know that you're not a prisoner here. You're free to choose. No one will force you into anything you don't want." Emily didn't believe him at first. How could she? She had been controlled her entire life, molded into something others wanted her to be. But the sincerity in Henry's eyes, the genuine kindness in his words, made her question everything she thought she knew. For the first time, Emily felt a flicker of hope. She didn't have to accept the life that had been forced upon her. There was a chance, however small, that she could choose her own path. But the question remained, could she trust him? Could she trust anyone again after everything she had been through? Henry's words echoed in her mind as the days passed. Slowly, she began to allow herself to believe in the possibility of a different life. Maybe, just maybe, she could have a future of her own choosing. But it wasn't going to be easy. Emily was still trapped by her past, and letting go of everything she knew was terrifying. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt the stirrings of something she had long forgotten: freedom. The days following Henry's offer of freedom felt like an endless storm to Emily. She was caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. Could she really choose her own future? The idea seemed foreign, almost impossible. Her past had shaped her in ways she didn't fully understand, and the thought of breaking free from everything she had known was both thrilling and terrifying. Henry, however, seemed to believe in her in ways no one else had ever done before. His confidence in her was unsettling at times, yet it offered a strange comfort. Every time he spoke to her, she felt as if she were slowly awakening from a deep sleep. One morning, Henry took Emily on a walk through the estate. The air was cool, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting playful shadows on the ground. As they walked side by side, Henry spoke about his plans for the future, his goals, his dreams for the estate. But Emily couldn't focus on his words. She was too distracted by the feeling of the grass beneath her feet, the gentle breeze that tousled her hair, and the sheer normalcy of it all. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged. Henry turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "Emily, I want you to feel like this is your home, too," he said, his voice softer now. "You don't have to leave if you don't want to. But I want you to know, you're not a prisoner here. You can make a life of your own." Emily swallowed hard. She had never considered that before. Could she really stay here? Could she create a life for herself in this place? As she looked up at Henry, his words hung in the air. There was a certain kindness in his gaze, something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. But there was still doubt in her heart. How could she ever trust anyone again after everything that had happened to her? How could she be sure that this wasn't just another manipulation? Yet, there was something about Henry that made her believe in the possibility of something better. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to open up to the idea of staying at the estate. She spent more time with Henry, learning about his life, his struggles, and his dreams. She was surprised by how much they had in common. They both yearned for something more than the roles they had been assigned by society. Henry wanted to break free from the rigid expectations of his title, and Emily wanted to break free from the chains that had bound her for so long. Slowly, they began to form a bond. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something stronger than friendship. It was a connection built on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared desire for freedom. As the days passed, Emily felt herself changing. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble, piece by piece. She started to believe that she deserved more than the life that had been forced upon her. But there was still the matter of her parents. They had sold her, after all. Could she really cut ties with them forever? The question gnawed at her. But as she looked at Henry, standing beside her, offering her a future she had never imagined, she realized that she didn't have to choose between them. She could choose herself. And that was the first step toward freedom. As the days passed, Emily's internal struggle continued. She had begun to believe that she could build a new life, but there were still so many unknowns. Henry had been patient, always giving her the space she needed, but at the same time, offering her his unwavering support. They spent more time together, discussing their hopes and dreams. Emily began to open up about the life she had left behind, the life that had been dictated by others. She spoke of her parents, their coldness, their rejection of her because of something beyond her control. She told Henry how she had spent years feeling as though she was nothing, as if her worth was determined by things she could not change. As Emily shared her story, Henry's expression remained soft, his eyes never leaving hers. He listened intently, as if each word she spoke mattered more than the last. Emily wasn't used to being listened to like this. For so long, her voice had been ignored. But with Henry, she felt heard. "You're not nothing, Emily," Henry said one evening, his voice steady. "You are more than anyone ever gave you credit for. You've been strong all this time. And you still are." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Emily's heart ache. Could it really be that simple? Could it be that she was worthy of something better, something real? That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She thought about her parents, and how they had cast her aside so easily. She thought about Henry, and how, despite everything she had been through, he was offering her a chance at something more. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to think about a future that wasn't defined by the past. She had spent so long being a prisoner to her own life, to her family's expectations. But now, Henry was giving her the key to her own freedom. The next morning, as they walked through the gardens, Henry stopped and turned to face her. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I will respect it. But I believe in you. I believe in what you can become." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. Henry's belief in her was something she had never experienced before. It wasn't just about the life he was offering her. It was about the person he believed she could be. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. "Thank you," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't have to thank me," Henry replied, his smile warm. "You're the one who has to believe in yourself." Emily took a deep breath, looking around at the vibrant flowers in the garden, the bright sky above her. It was beautiful, this life, and it was hers for the taking. She didn't have to hold on to the past anymore. She didn't have to be defined by what others thought of her. Slowly, she started to realize that the life she had been given was hers to shape, and it would no longer be shaped by fear or regret. It would be shaped by the choices she made, by the belief that she could have more than what she was given. Henry had given her the courage to believe in that, and for the first time, she felt the possibility of a future that could be hers. Her future, not anyone else's. Emily woke up to a new reality that morning, a reality she had only dared to imagine before. The mansion was no longer just a place where she was confined. It was slowly becoming her home. The grand halls no longer echoed with loneliness, but with the promise of something better. Henry had made it clear that she was free to leave at any time, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to stay. She had begun to find comfort in the quiet mornings and the peaceful walks through the garden. Each step she took brought her closer to something she had lost long ago, her sense of self. That afternoon, Henry invited her to join him for a ride through the estate. They traveled through fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, the breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. As they rode side by side, Emily felt something stir within her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She felt a sense of peace. She felt free. The sound of the horses' hooves against the dirt road was the only noise, and for once, Emily wasn't preoccupied with her past or her fears. Henry looked over at her, a slight smile on his face. "You look at ease," he remarked. Emily hesitated before responding. "I think I am," she said quietly, surprised at her own words. Henry nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "It's been a long time since you felt this way, hasn't it?" he asked gently. Emily didn't need to think to know what he meant. The weight of her past had been hanging over her for so long, suffocating her. But now, the air was lighter, the world seemed brighter. She had finally begun to let go of the chains that had held her down. "It's been a lifetime," she replied softly, her eyes meeting his. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as Emily. As a person, not a thing. Henry's eyes softened. "You deserve to feel this way, Emily," he said, his voice low and sincere. "No one should have made you believe otherwise." Emily felt something warm in her chest at his words. She had spent years doubting her worth, trying to fit into a world that didn't accept her for who she truly was. But Henry had shown her that she could be more than just the sum of her past mistakes. She could be someone who chose her own path. As they rode in silence, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the landscape. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, relief, hope, and a quiet excitement for the future. She didn't know what it held, but for the first time, she didn't fear it. The past no longer had the power to define her. It was in that moment, with the wind in her hair and Henry by her side, that she realized she had been given something priceless, the chance to rewrite her story. And this time, the ending would be hers to choose. Weeks passed, and the feeling of comfort Emily had found in her new life began to grow stronger. She spent her days exploring the vast grounds of the estate, speaking with Henry more openly than she ever had with anyone before. The connection between them deepened, though neither had yet defined it. It was more than just friendship, more than the simple bond of two people thrown together by circumstance. It was something unspoken, something that lingered in the air whenever they were in the same room. But Emily had learned to be cautious. Her heart, fragile from years of being discarded and mistreated, wasn't ready to leap into the unknown. She had so much to figure out, and the future seemed both terrifying and full of possibilities. One evening, Henry invited her to a small gathering at the estate. It was nothing extravagant, just a few trusted friends and close family members. Emily was nervous. She wasn't used to being around people who hadn't known her past. But Henry assured her that everything would be fine. Just be yourself, he told her with a reassuring smile. That's all anyone here will expect from you. His words gave her courage, and as she entered the grand dining room, she realized that Henry's world was different from the one she had come from. It wasn't filled with judgment or expectation. It was full of warmth, kindness, and genuine connection. People greeted her with smiles, and she found herself relaxing more than she thought possible. The evening passed in a blur of laughter and conversation. Emily found herself seated beside Henry for much of the evening, talking about everything and nothing. It was easy to forget her past in moments like these. As the night drew to a close, Henry walked her back to her room, his presence steady beside her. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice soft. Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "Thank you," she replied. She paused for a moment, then looked up at him. "I'm starting to think I can do this," she said quietly, almost to herself. Henry's eyes softened, and he stopped walking, turning to face her. "You've always been able to do it, Emily," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You've just needed the space to see it." His words hit her harder than she expected. For the first time, Emily felt truly seen, not as someone broken or discarded, but as someone capable, someone strong. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry smiled, his expression gentle and understanding. "You never needed to do anything alone," he said. Emily felt her heart swell with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name yet, but something real. "I know you're still figuring things out," he continued. "But remember, whatever path you choose, you don't have to walk it alone." His words hung in the air between them, and Emily felt a wave of emotion rush over her. For the first time in so long, she felt the possibility of love, real love, not based on obligation or necessity, but on choice. She wasn't sure where this journey would take her, but she knew one thing. It was her journey now, and she wouldn't have to face it alone. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of self-discovery for Emily. The mansion, once a place of confinement, had become a place of opportunity. With each passing day, she began to embrace the freedom she had once thought was impossible. Henry continued to support her in ways she hadn't expected. He encouraged her to explore the estate, to find her own rhythm, and to carve out a space for herself in this new world. But with the newfound peace came moments of doubt. Emily often found herself wondering if she truly deserved this life. Her past clung to her like a shadow, reminding her of the days when she had been discarded, a mere object of someone else's decision. But as she spent more time with Henry, the weight of those memories began to fade. He never treated her as anything less than equal. They spent hours talking about books, about dreams, about the world beyond the estate. Henry opened her eyes to a future she hadn't known was possible. They laughed together, shared quiet dinners, and at times, simply enjoyed each other's company in comfortable silence. Henry never pushed her, but always made sure she knew that she was not alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the garden, Henry asked Emily to join him on a walk. They strolled through the rows of blooming roses, their fragrance heavy in the air. Henry paused, turning to face her, his eyes soft and serious. "Emily, I've seen you grow in ways I never imagined," he said quietly. "You've come so far since the first time we met. And I can't help but feel that this connection we have, is something more than just a passing moment." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew what he was saying. She had felt it too. There was a growing tension between them, a pull that neither of them had fully acknowledged until now. But Emily wasn't ready. Her heart was still fragile, still healing from years of rejection. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she whispered, looking away. Henry reached out and gently lifted her chin, making her meet his gaze. "You don't have to be ready," he said softly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I'm here. And whatever you decide, I'll be here for you." His words were simple, but they resonated deep within Emily. She had spent so much of her life wondering if anyone would ever truly see her. And here Henry was, seeing her, not as a broken piece of the past, but as someone worthy of a future. Emily felt her walls begin to crack, just a little. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if she was ready to embrace the love that was slowly growing between them. But she knew one thing for certain. For the first time, she was no longer running from her past. She was standing still, facing it, and embracing the person she was becoming. And whatever came next, she would face it with strength, with the belief that she deserved it. Henry was right. She had come a long way, and the path ahead was hers to choose. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Emily began to feel like she was truly finding herself. Henry's words echoed in her mind. "Whatever you decide, I'll be here for you." That promise, simple as it was, began to take root in her heart. It wasn't just about the estate or the luxuries she had never known. It was about the space Henry gave her to heal, to breathe, to be herself without the constant pressure of the past. Still, doubts lingered. Could she truly embrace the life before her without the weight of her former identity holding her back? She had been told who she was for so long, had been made to feel like an object, a transaction. Now, the idea of choosing for herself, of becoming who she truly was, felt both liberating and frightening. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Emily found herself standing by the window of her room, watching the world outside. She thought of the days before, when she had felt so small, so unseen. And now, in this moment, she realized how much she had grown. It wasn't just about Henry, though he had been a guiding force in her life. It was about her, about the woman she was becoming. She had begun to trust herself again. Henry found her there, gazing out into the evening, and he stepped quietly into the room, his presence comforting. "You're deep in thought," he said, his voice low and gentle. Emily smiled, turning to face him. "I'm just thinking," she said softly, "about everything, about how far I've come." Henry approached her, his eyes searching hers. "You've come a long way, Emily," he said, his voice full of admiration. "But remember, this is just the beginning." His words filled her with a strange sense of peace. It was true. She had come a long way, but there was still so much ahead of her. And for the first time, she felt ready to face it. They stood together in the quiet of the room, a gentle silence between them. Emily felt the uncertainty in her chest slowly dissolve, replaced by a growing sense of certainty. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't face it alone. She had Henry, and more importantly, she had herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For everything." Henry reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to thank me," he replied, his voice steady. "You've always had everything you need inside you. I just helped you see it." Emily looked into his eyes, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She wasn't sure where the road ahead would lead, but she knew she was no longer afraid. The woman she had been was no longer the woman she was becoming. And that, in itself, was the greatest gift she could give herself. With a quiet smile, Emily squeezed his hand. For the first time in a long while, she felt the freedom to move forward, to embrace her future, no matter where it took her. Together, they stepped into the night, the stars above shining brightly, promising that tomorrow would be a new beginning. The days that followed felt like a gentle unfolding for Emily. She had taken the first steps toward healing, toward owning her life, and every day, the walls she had built around herself seemed to crumble just a little more. There were moments of doubt, of course, but those moments grew fewer as she learned to trust herself. She spent more time with Henry, talking about her hopes, her fears, and even the things she never thought she would speak of again. And through it all, Henry remained patient, never rushing her, always there when she needed him. One afternoon, as they sat together in the study, Emily found herself reflecting on how far she had come. It was a quiet moment, just the two of them, surrounded by the peaceful stillness of the room. Henry glanced up from his book, noticing the way Emily was staring out the window. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. Emily turned to him, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I was just thinking," she began, her voice light. "I've spent so much of my life waiting for someone to choose me. But now, I realize that I don't need to wait anymore. I can choose my own path." Henry's expression softened, and he closed his book, setting it aside. "That's exactly what I've been hoping for you to realize," he said, his voice full of quiet pride. "You've always had the power to choose. You just needed the space to see it." Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't quite named yet. Henry had given her more than just a place to stay or a life of comfort. He had given her the chance to find herself, to find her own strength. Over the following weeks, Emily continued to find her footing in this new life. She began to take on more responsibilities at the estate, helping Henry with various projects, and it felt good to contribute, to have a purpose. And with each task she completed, her confidence grew. She was no longer the fragile girl she had once been. She was becoming someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun set over the rolling hills, Emily turned to Henry. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for showing me that I don't have to be afraid anymore." Henry smiled, his eyes warm and sincere. "You've always had the strength inside you, Emily. I just helped you see it." There was a long pause, a comfortable silence between them, and Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't the girl who had been sold or discarded. She wasn't the girl who had felt invisible for so long. She was Emily, and she was enough. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. Henry reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "No matter where your journey takes you," he said softly, "you will always have a place here." Emily squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of warmth wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. And with Henry by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. Together, they had created something new, something that was built on trust, understanding, and the promise of a future where both of them could be free to choose their own paths. The weeks passed with a steady, reassuring calm that Emily had never known. Every day, she grew more confident in her new life, in her ability to choose, to decide what kind of woman she wanted to be. Henry was there, as he always had been, a steady presence, supportive but never overbearing. They continued to spend time together, working side by side, laughing, talking, and discovering new ways to connect. There was an ease between them now, a natural rhythm that had settled into their relationship. It was no longer about the past, the things that had shaped them into who they were. It was about the future, the possibilities that lay ahead. One afternoon, as they walked through the lush gardens of the estate, Henry turned to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Emily," he said, his voice low and serious, "I've been thinking about something. About us." Emily glanced at him, her heart skipping a beat. She had been waiting for this conversation, for him to acknowledge the bond that had been growing between them. "What about us?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. Henry stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I want you to know that I care for you, deeply. Not just as a friend, or someone I've helped along the way, but as someone who is important to me. And I want to be there for you, not just as someone who offers support, but as someone who shares in your future." Emily's heart fluttered at his words. She had known, on some level, that this moment was coming, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel real. She had never thought she would find someone who would see her for who she truly was, someone who would care for her with no strings attached, no expectations. "I care for you too, Henry," she said, her voice soft, her gaze meeting his. "More than I ever thought I would." There was a long pause, the air between them charged with the weight of their shared words. Emily felt a wave of warmth flood through her, a feeling of being seen, of being valued. She had never felt this way before, not with anyone. Henry reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "Whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, know that I'll be here, by your side," he said, his voice unwavering, full of certainty. Emily squeezed his hand, the connection between them solidifying in that simple gesture. She knew now that she didn't have to carry the weight of her past alone, and she didn't have to face the future with fear. She had found someone who truly cared for her, someone who believed in her even when she hadn't believed in herself. For the first time in her life, Emily felt at peace. She had her freedom, her choice, and the love that came with it. And with Henry's hand in hers, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with strength, with confidence, and with the knowledge that she was no longer defined by the past. She was Emily, and her future was hers to choose. The seasons continued to change, and Emily's life began to settle into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. She had found a balance between her own desires and the life she had built with Henry. Every day, she grew stronger, more certain of who she was and who she was becoming. She had found a purpose in the work she did on the estate, helping with various projects and taking on responsibilities she had never thought herself capable of. Henry continued to be her steady support, but now, their relationship had evolved. It was no longer just about him helping her find herself. It was about them building something together. One crisp autumn morning, as they walked through the orchard, Henry stopped and turned to face her. The trees were beginning to shed their golden leaves, and the air was filled with the scent of ripe apples. Emily had grown accustomed to these walks, these quiet moments where they shared everything and nothing at all. "Emily," Henry said, his voice serious, yet warm. "I want you to know that I am proud of everything you've accomplished. You've come so far, and I can see the person you've become." Emily's heart swelled at his words. She had spent so long doubting herself, unsure of her worth, and now, Henry was acknowledging the strength she had discovered within herself. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Henry smiled, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, something Emily couldn't quite place. "You've always had it in you," he replied, his gaze never leaving hers. "You just needed to see it." The weight of his words lingered between them as they continued their walk, the silence comfortable, as if they both understood what had been said without needing to say more. But as they approached the edge of the orchard, Henry stopped once again, this time taking her hands in his. "Emily, I know we've been through a lot together, and I know that this journey hasn't been easy, but I want to ask you something." Emily felt her heart race, unsure of what he was about to say. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry took a deep breath, his expression soft but filled with sincerity. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future with you, not just here, but wherever life takes us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment in passing, but never had she thought it would come so soon. But as she looked into Henry's eyes, she knew, with a certainty she had never felt before, that this was where she belonged. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, I want that too." Henry's face broke into a smile that was so full of joy and relief that it made Emily's heart swell. She had found her place in the world, a place where she was loved, valued, and, most importantly, free. Together, they had built something beautiful, something that would endure, and she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, stronger than ever. The months that followed were filled with moments of quiet joy and building anticipation. Emily and Henry had begun planning their future together, with each passing day strengthening the bond between them. The estate felt more like home than it ever had, not just because of the physical beauty that surrounded them, but because they had created a space together where love, respect, and trust flourished. They spent their days working side by side, discussing plans for the estate, organizing the land, and making it thrive. Each task, no matter how small, was a reminder of the life they were building, together. One crisp evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Emily and Henry found themselves standing on the balcony of their shared home. The air was cool, and the soft breeze carried the scent of the blooming flowers. Emily stood silently for a moment, her hands resting on the railing as she gazed out at the vast landscape. Henry joined her, his presence as comforting as it had always been. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "It's amazing," Emily said softly, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "To think about where we were, how far we've come." Henry nodded, his voice steady. "We've come a long way, Emily. You've come a long way." There was a pause, a deep understanding between them. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It had been a long journey, one that had been filled with pain, uncertainty, and fear. But it had also been filled with moments of grace, of rediscovery, of love. I never imagined I could feel this way, she said, turning to face him. So at peace, so at home. Henry smiled, his eyes soft and affectionate. You deserve all of this, Emily. Every bit of it. Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had been broken once, lost and discarded, but now she was whole. She had found herself, her strength, and her place in this world. And she had found someone who loved her, not in spite of her past, but because of the person she had become. I'm ready for whatever comes next, Emily said, her voice steady, but full of emotion. With you. Henry squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with pride. We'll face it together, he replied, his voice unwavering. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. They stood there for a while, the evening air around them calm and peaceful, the world stretching out before them, full of possibilities. Emily no longer felt like the girl who had been cast aside, the girl who had been invisible. She was Emily, strong and confident, capable of creating a future of her own making. And with Henry by her side, she knew that they would face the future, not as two separate individuals, but as a team, as equals, building a life that would be their own, a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. As the days stretched into months, Emily found herself fully immersed in the life she had built alongside Henry. The once overwhelming uncertainty of her future had now settled into something far more solid. She no longer woke each morning feeling like she was just surviving. Instead, she woke up knowing that each day was a gift, a chance to shape her own destiny. They had built a partnership, one based on respect, trust, and love. Together, they made decisions about the estate, about their future, about the legacy they hoped to create. Emily had never imagined that this life was possible for someone like her. She had once been defined by others, shaped by their expectations, and forced into a role she never wanted. But now, she was creating her own story, one where she was the author, not the character written for her. She had a voice, a place, and a purpose. Henry continued to be her unwavering support. It wasn't just the grand gestures or the promises he made. It was the quiet moments, the shared smiles, the way he always listened, always made her feel heard. In turn, Emily had learned to give back the same. Unwavering support. She stood by his side as an equal, not as someone who needed rescuing, but as someone who could stand tall next to him, who could carry her own weight in their shared journey. Their relationship had transformed into something deeper than either of them could have imagined when they first met. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, they found themselves standing at the edge of the estate, overlooking the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. The view was breathtaking, an expanse of fields and gardens, a testament to their shared efforts. Henry stood close beside Emily, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Look at what we've done, he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Emily took in the sight before her, feeling a swell of emotion. We did this, she replied, her voice soft but sure. Together. For the first time, Emily truly understood the weight of those words. She had always felt like an outsider, like someone who didn't belong. But now, in this moment, standing next to Henry, surrounded by the life they had created, she felt as if she had finally found her place. The future stretched out before them, full of endless possibilities. What's next? Emily asked, turning to look at Henry, her eyes filled with curiosity and excitement. Henry smiled, his gaze meeting hers with a warmth that was undeniable. Whatever you want, Emily. Whatever we want. The promise in his voice made her heart race. For the first time, Emily didn't feel bound by her past. She felt free, unburdened, and ready to take on whatever life had in store for her. And with Henry by her side, she knew that the future was theirs to build, together. The possibilities were endless, and the only thing that mattered was that they would face it all side by side, with love, strength, and an unwavering belief in each other.